We are back on the 0 Hour, broadcasting from Netroots Nation 2016 in St. Louis, Missouri. And joining us now is Jessica Post. Jessica is the executive director of the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee, which is responsible for taking back as many state houses as possible from the Republicans, which is a big deal for a variety of reasons, including, one, a lot of progressive change can happen at the state level, and two, and this is a big deal, in 2020 we will be redistricting again, and since the Republicans have been gerrymandering like crazy, which is why they control Congress right now, despite being widely despised among the public at large, this is a big deal. So, Jessica, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So, first of all, I gave what I would call a very shorthand description of what you guys do.
Yeah.
So what would you say is your mission statement?
So our mission is to build democratic power in the states with a focus on winning back state legislative majorities. And so how do we execute that? We primarily work with the state legislative leaders, and so we work with majority leaders, minority leaders, speakers in both state houses and state senates across the country to help them develop a strong campaign and game plan for the year. And then we obviously help them with financial resources, but we also help them with strategic resources, everything from data to advice on how to run a great field program and ground game, and then to all the way to fundraising advice.
So basically it's a collaborative process.
Absolutely.
They kind of tell you what they need and how you can help them. And so do you provide, so you do data, so do you do polling and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a partnership called SCOUT, which is an acronym for Securing Chamber Outcomes, because as you know, every data project has to have an analogy, right?
Right,
Absolutely. Or an acronym, I mean
right.
an acronym.
No, I know, for sure. Yeah.
So we do, we've been polling nationally, and we can provide that in 50 states. So with a little bit of predictive modeling that folks can use to make decisions about which races to target.
And do you do issues polling as well as candidate polling?
It's much more candidate to candidate. I think we rely on, in states, we've joined a number of polling consortiums where there are states that do a little bit of polling on a variety of issues. So we do work with the states on that.
And we're talking with Jessica Post, Executive Director of the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee. One of the reasons why I asked that, Jessica, and it might fit with your mission, is that it seems to me we're constantly having this conversation. There are a lot of districts. I don't know every district in the country, but there's some districts I know pretty well. I'm from upstate New York, for example. I know those districts. I know a lot of the working class districts, former Rust Belt and so on, which is where I'm from. And it seems to me that sometimes we don't frame our candidacies in these districts the right way. In other words, we frame it as, well, this tends to be a red district, so let's run a Republican that looks let's run a Democrat that looks kind of like a Republican.
Right.
And to me, it seems to me, if it were more issues driven, if it was more, let's get your jobs back, let's see what we can do to get your wages up, let's see what we can do to give you workplace protections, do something for women, a gender gap and all that, Social Security, strengthening Social Security, that we might do better than trying to be Republicans in these districts. But I don't know, what do you think?
No, I agree completely. And look, I think our focus is to not airdrop in a lot of national messaging, but to really work with the state legislative leaders to make sure that they're positioning the best messages for their districts. So, for example, Mike Gronstal, who is our chairman, he's running in an Iowa State Senate district, and Mike Gronstal is extremely frugal. He's a coupon clipper, and he's an extreme couponer. He'll tell you that if you save up and go on double coupon day, that box of Ritz crackers is only 92 cents. And so he's taken that same approach. And that's like one of the stories he'll tell, right? And so he goes into the grocery store with coupons. People in the community know him. They know him to be frugal. And so when he goes into Iowa to manage the state budget, people know that he'll take that same approach to responsible spending in Iowa. And so one of the things we try to do with the consultants in the states and with the legislative caucuses is to make sure that our candidates are running on stories that are authentic to themselves, and that we're presenting these candidates in a way that are positioned in a unique way for their district, but also that speaks true to themselves. So that's one thing that we've really emphasized in terms of professionalizing and modernizing state legislative campaigns.
So that means getting to know the candidates a little bit, right?
That's absolutely right, yeah.
So that means, that actually sounds kind of fun. I have to say, for me, it feels like fun to go into a different district and say, well, who are you? What do you like? What do you like to do? What's your personality or what have you? So How many? But you can't work with all of them, obviously.
That's right.
So
yeah.
how many? How do you pick races?
Yeah.
First states and then races to target down into.
Yeah, so we work much more with the individual caucuses. You know, like you said, it's hard in DC to sit to figure out, is this a strong candidate? Is this a candidate that fits the district? So we'll work with the legislative leader in the state to say which are the races that are important, that you think are winnable. We use our data tools to do that, and we say, here are the ones we think are winnable, but where do you think you've recruited strong candidates? Because in some cases, a district may not look winnable on the surface, but they recruited a popular coach or a local farmer that is well known, and then as a result, they'll be able to run that person for office. So in terms of picking states, we really put an emphasis on states where we can win Democratic majorities, or hold Democratic majorities, so those states that are on the cusp. And this year, many of those states, we have a lot of states right on the cusp, right? So Colorado State Senate, we win one more seat, we would win it back. The Nevada State Senate, we win one more seat that Obama won, we win it back. And then we're very close in the Minnesota State House to winning back a Democratic majority, the New Mexico State House, the State Senate in Maine, and then also both chambers in New Hampshire. And we think that there's actually a great shot potentially to win back the Michigan House too. We'd need to win 9 seats to get there, but the electoral environment looks very good in Michigan for us. You know,
Michigan is a huge one because, of course, they have the emergency manager law and some of the other things that are kind of pretty draconian that the Republicans have put in. So do you ever get involved, or maybe this is something that the caucuses do, but do you ever get involved in actually recruiting candidates when there's a state that's in play and maybe somebody says, well, we don't know who we need to run in this district? Do you actually ever get involved in saying, well, here's somebody that you might want to take a look at?
Well, always we defer to the knowledge of people on the ground, but I will tell you this year, Shanna Bellows made the decision to run for state senate in Maine, and some of your listeners may know Shanna from when she ran for U.S. Senate.
We had her on the show,
And so I came from Emily's list where I recruited women to run for Congress, and then later on the state program where we recruited women to run for state legislature directly. And so the Maine Senate caucus gave me a call and said, you have this background in recruiting women to run for office. Can you talk to Shanna about what it might be to run for state senate? And so I picked up the phone and we had a great conversation about what that might be like for her, and now she's a candidate for state senate in Maine.
Oh, that's great.
With, I think, a great shot at victory.
Yeah, I would think she would, because she got some national, statewide visibility when she ran for the Senate.
Exactly.
U.S. Senate. Yeah. All right, so what are your plans beyond 2016? We've got, obviously you've got your hands full between now and November, and it's going to be exciting. And I imagine you personally, and again, we're talking with Jessica Post, who is the executive director of the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee, but I'm sure you travel a lot and you got your hands full between now and November, but what are your plans for 2017, 2018, and beyond?
Oh, that's a great question. So our focus is on 2020. Everything that we're doing right now builds toward 2020, that key pre-redistricting year, where if we win and sustain Democratic majorities through that year, we'll control redistricting in the states where the legislative chambers draw the district. So right now, we're looking at states like Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, where maybe we can't win them back in one cycle, but if we can add some seats in the legislature, we can add potentially more in 18 and then flip it in 2020. So we're looking at gradual progress in some of those states. Other states like that, Georgia, and then maybe and then maybe breaking supermajorities. If we have a governor and the governor and the legislature are involved in redistricting in that state. Missouri, where we're sitting, is my home state. I grew up outside of St. Louis, and so that's a place where we would need to break a supermajority. Let's say Chris Koster wins the governor's race, we'd need to break supermajorities to make sure that he is able to sustain the veto of potentially Republican maps coming out of redistricting.
Oh, okay, perfect. Well, you guys are doing really interesting work, and I thank you for coming on the program, and thank you for the work you do. Jessica Post, Executive Director, Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it. Thank you.